Morning, Jacques. All right. Okay, colleagues, so we are at executive standing October 25th, our first meeting in person for a while. Nice to see you all. We are in chambers and we will be wearing our masks when we're not speaking. So I'll call the meeting to order. Ask for the approval of the minutes of August 16th, 2021. Moved by Councillor Mason, seconded by Councillor Russell. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Hensby, by the way, is calling in, I'm told. So we look forward to that. Business arising, declarations, order of business. The order of business is in front of you. If nobody has an issue with that, perhaps somebody could move it. Councillor Blackburn, seconded by Councillor Morse. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Calls for declaration of conflict of interest. Motions of reconsideration, rescission, deferred business, tabled matters. We have none. Correspondence, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Savage. No correspondence for today's meeting has been received from the clerk's office.
Thank you. Petitions, colleagues? No presentations. Information items brought forward, none. We'll go to reports. 12.1.1. What does next year look like for us? Halifax Regional Council meeting schedule. Council, what is your wish? Committee, sorry, what is your wish? Councillor Blackburn?
Motion on the floor.
Thank you.
I move that the Executive Standing Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council approve the proposed 2022 Regional Council meeting schedule as outlined in the staff report dated July 21st, 2021. I so move.
Second.
Here to respond to them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a question so much as a comment. I was just talking to the Deputy Clerk. I think that I'd like to put a stake in the ground now that where possible in the summer, when we have the new amended rules that allow us to flip more easily back and forth between virtual and face-to-face meetings, I think that it would be great for, obviously for councillors, but especially for staff. The number of times we've had staff come back to do a report and when they're from their vacation then leave immediately again. If July and August especially, we were looking to try and schedule virtual meetings, though if we have a public hearing, I don't think we can do that. I agree with that statement, but I just wanted to throw that out there because, if we're going to make that kind of change, I think now's the time, not, any farther away from COVID. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a good point. All right, ready for the question, colleagues? How are we doing this, by hand? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Committee, none. 12.2, 12.3.1. Councillor Mason, procedure of the Council Administrative Order to include land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll put the motion on the floor and then I'll very briefly say why. I move the Executive Committee request a staff report regarding amending Administrative Order 1 to include a land acknowledgement on the agenda of HRM councils and committees. I so move.
Second by Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, since I even submitted this, things continue to evolve. So I want to address the article that was in the CBC the other day. I think it was middle of last week. We have started, you have started, and I thank you for that, Mr. Mayor, doing a land acknowledgement at the start of council. And certainly we do land acknowledgements at the start of most public events. Because of the questions in the community about when they should be done, I spoke with Cheryl Jehu, the Indigenous staff liaison in diversity and inclusion, and her position was that best practices and what other cities and provincial governments are doing is they're doing a land acknowledgement for every committee and standing committee meeting. And that aligned with where I think we need to go. So I bring this forward for a staff report because I think that there is information, about how we're going to make it work and what the wording would be, though obviously there needs to be room for some lack of formality around it. That goes to the CBC article. So the CBC, for those who didn't read it, and I should have sent it to the committee, there was this great article talking about how we don't want the land acknowledgements to become rote. It's something you quickly read through very quickly and then you're done, on to the next thing. And we're being encouraged, and this is certainly something I've seen at FCMs and other meetings, that we are being encouraged to try and find ways to ground the land acknowledgement in lived experience, something personal or something coming up, make it something more real than just saying the land acknowledgement, finding some way to say, and this is why we did that. But there are some folks who feel the land acknowledgement perhaps has become rote, but there are definitely folks in the community who feel that it needs to happen. And I feel that based on the conversations we had during the engagement with the Assembly of First Nations and KMKNO and the Grand Council and the bands during the Cultural Heritage Priority Plan engagement that I was honored to be a part of, that we definitely heard that people in the Mi'kmaq Nation would like to have this before all of our meetings. So I'd ask for your support in this for a staff report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Okay. Ready for the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? That is passed. Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Mason as well on 1232, Research NS Partnership.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the Executive Standing Committee recommend Halifax Regional Council request a staff report identifying opportunities and funding sources for establishing a research partnership with the Research Nova Scotia to develop a coordinated research approach to address municipal challenges. I so move. Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this one is interesting because I have some very, legalistic, reasons in the motion paper, but I'll put it to you guys more like this. We already spend a lot of money on these things. So the best example was the city every year would spend between $10,000 and $30,000 doing a contract with Peter Dunker when he was still, before he retired from Dalhousie. And they would go and do research. Graduate students in his, under him would go and do research around Point Pleasant Park and urban forestry and all this stuff. And we just never made it into a more formal partnership. That money, without even putting more money into it, should have been a research institute that we would then have multi-year longitudinal studies rather than it going back and forth, this year we're doing this year we're doing that. But the opportunity too is that with Research Nova Scotia, which is an amalgamation of a couple of different smaller organizations that was stood up about 2 years ago, they now, if we do this and we can find a way working with Research Nova Scotia to identify areas that we would want to see research that benefit us, the municipality, and our operations and our planning, they exist to go and find matching federal and provincial money and bring that in and then expand the envelope and the scope of what can happen. So I think it's worth exploring. May not work out. I want to acknowledge that. It's a brand new thing for us to do, but given that we have 7 degree granting institutions in the community college, we're already spending a bunch of money. Another great example of this, which is arm's length from us, is Halifax Water. Endowing the water chair at Dalhousie for years means that the world's understanding of the dangers of lead in drinking water has been greatly expanded because of Halifax Water ratepayers paying for that for 10 years. We know more about it than ever, and that's why you saw a flurry of rapid action 2 or 3 years ago to work to replace the water leads or the laterals going into houses where they still had lead supply. So I would ask for support in this. It's a conversation that needs to happen between staff and the Research Nova Scotia folks to see what the art of the possible is, and I think that it's the kind of thing that we could start small and build it over time as we see results. So I'd ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Morse.
Just a quick question. Is this a wide range of topics that could be researched? Because I'm thinking we have some gaps in our knowledge about housing and housing needs. And I'm wondering if that might be added as a subject area?
Anybody else? I'll speak to that. It seems to me that the obvious ones would be planning, especially rural planning, forestry, because we're already paying money every year, and things related to that. At one point before Dr. Jacques Mantonio left the Police Commission, there was talk at the Police Commission when I was on it years ago about participating with St. Mary's in Dal in a Peace and Justice Institute. That's kind of gone by the wayside, as most of things have during COVID. But that would be part of the staff reporting, would be to identify. I suspect, I'm going to look at Jacques for this, it would be an interesting memo to send to managers and executive directors and say, where are we already spending money on stuff like this? Because I don't know that we even have a list, so it would be interesting to build on what we're already doing. But yeah, I mean, planning obviously, you know, even today after the changes last week is still 80% of what we do, so I would imagine that would be one of them, you know. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just say a couple of words on this too. You know, this motion is kind of apropos to where we are today. I mean, 5-6 years ago, when you looked at the research and innovation stuff that Halifax was involved in, it was fairly limited, and now it's just taken off. The city's involved in Volta lab. We pay 200 and some thousand a year to have a partnership there to look at interesting things. We now have the pier that the port is looking at, who want us to be a partner, and they've got some international reach and doing some very interesting things. A few years ago, no, maybe 2 years ago, we applied for the Smart City program, Jacques, and I think then housing was what we wanted to do, was look at what innovative things can we do on affordable housing. But Halifax has become a tech center. There's more and more research being done. It's contributing very much to our economy, and I think that we should be part of these, and this might be something, Councillor Mason, that would look at all of those potential involvements that we have and see which ones make sense. I think the Volta, for example, I was a big proponent of it. As much as anything else, it was to be part of what was happening in Volta. The other orders of government had put stuff in. But I think with Miriam and now, what's the new person's name? I can't remember. I think that there's a real potential for the city to be, you know, to be part of this innovation economy, and research being a big piece of that. So I think it's worthwhile. All right. Anybody else? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Those opposed? That will carry. Oh, just on that last topic, Jacques, it's probably not something you need to weigh in on, but you and the staff have been very involved in a lot of this stuff. Jake Whalen, for example, has done a lot of work on this through our government relations and economic development folks, and he's been very involved in some of the stuff that's happening at Volta. I don't know if you want to speak to it briefly on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actively involved. We actually have a paper on this that's already in the system about, you know, which partnerships exist already between various business units and various partners, right? Whether it's Volta and Pier at the port, we're working with Wendy Luther and the folks at the Halifax Partnership to try to determine how do we show up, you know, in what fashion, what kind of a partnership does that look like. But Councillor Mason is correct. I mean, there's a lot of granting councils at the national level, some of which can leverage some provincial money as well. And the question then becomes, you know, what are the focus areas? What are council's priorities? How does that all work together with business plans? And we've been quietly setting up a policy shop in Gria as well, right? So we have, you know, more recently there's been a secondment to that shop. So we have to look at it from a broader organizational perspective and external partnerships perspective as we go forward. So I think it's very much apropos to look at this and come back to council with sort of the bigger, you know, looking at all the moving parts and say, here's how we're gonna actually play in this space. And I think there's tremendous potential, like the mayor points out, around leveraging these partnerships. You know, I remember, you know, we even had through Bloomberg, the Harvard Bloomberg programs, the mayor and I were involved. We had submitted an idea, as to how do we actually partner with the province better? How does that work? How does that, so it might be timely right now to look at that question, to be honest with you, but, with the new government and all. But so there's all kinds of various ideas, both in terms of sort of the provision of hard service, but also in the provision of partnerships and on the softer side. We're heavily involved, as you all know, in social policy now, right, in various fronts. And, how do we make that a better place for, our residents, and, how can we actually focus our efforts to actually, generate tangible results? So it's where we are, and I think it's bang on to move in this direction.
Thank you. And I'm sure that the Halifax Partnership will be part of that staff report when it comes back, discussions with Wendy and her team. Colleagues, Clerk, I am getting emails from Councillor Hensby. He is listening, but he's not able to take part, but he is voting. Can he vote if he's not here?
Thank you, Mayor Savage. At the moment, our administrative order does not allow voting of councillors over the phone unless they are required in order to make quorum, which is not the case today.
Okay, because he's indicating support, but if he can't vote, he can't vote. Sorry, David. All right, colleagues, those are our public items. We have one in-camera motion. If somebody wants to consider, I'll just see if anybody has notices of motion. If there are none, does somebody want to move we go in camera? Councillor Russell, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Opposed? We'll go in camera. Thank you.